started, we ended sort of our class with this last slide where I just told you what was the final takeaway: two sources of light and screen. So we see two patches of light instead of interference pattern, no interference pattern observed. And was the time scale behind the phenomena that is responsible for the production of visible light. Okay, the atoms come down from higher states to lower states, taking only 10 to the power minus 9 seconds. Optical pulses are of the order of 10 to the power 15 per second. So basically, the interference pattern due to light coming from two separate sources will be stable for only a time of about 10 to the power minus 9 seconds, and after that the pattern will change to a different one. Okay, so and since our eyes, the human eye, we can resolve two events only if they are, just a second, yes, only if they are at least 1/10 of a second apart. Therefore, this kind of interference due to light coming from two separate sources goes unobserved. All right. So, the one of the primary requirements of watching interference pattern is that the the two waves, the two interfering waves, they must have a constant phase relationship between them over a fairly long interval of time. So, constant phase relationship is a very relative term. Constant for how long? Okay. So, this constant phase relationship must remain there for a fairly long amount of time so that sustained interference fringes can be observed by us. And if you remember our class on coherence, last to last class, where I showed you three pictures showing you what partial coherence, complete coherence and complete incoherence were. So basically we are looking for sources that are coherent. Okay, so the sources must be coherent in order to be able, in order that we humans can observe the interference patterns. Okay, so now basically this thing was not happening, because the moment you take two sources, you have the two waves, and you they go and you can represent them by rays, and they go and meet at a point on the screen, and you apply the principle of superposition for two waves acting at a point on the screen simultaneously, but you still do not get the interference, you do not observe the interference pattern. So how to get rid of this situation, how to what is the remedy for overcoming this difficulty? Okay, so this difficulty was overcome by Thomas Young in his famous double slit experiment. All right, so just before going over to explaining the experimental setup and how Thomas Young overcame this difficulty, I'll just share a little fact about Thomas Young to you, so that you realize the intelligence of this person and the fact that he overcame this difficulty. I mean, this is very obvious. Like, you want to see interference, you want to observe interference, you have two sources. Now, even if you understand that light coming from two sources does not remain coherent for a sustained amount of time, so that our eyes cannot resolve the interference patterns, and therefore we cannot observe. So what is the remedy? It's very difficult. I mean, people must have thought over it and not got it, and therefore the establishment of the wave nature of light got delayed. Now, this man, Thomas Young, he was actually a physician, doctor. Okay, he was a medical practitioner, and during his internship days, I suppose, or during his early medicine days, he was sent to you know that in Western countries, in those days especially, they were sent to uh, you know uh, second, what should I say, underdeveloped countries like Africa, etc., to do during their early period of their career. Doctors of who were just starting off their career, they were sent to these countries to treat the poor people over there. So Thomas Young, during such an expedition, he was treating eye patients. Okay, he was given the responsibility of treating eye patients, and during this period of treating eye patients, he sort of got interested in the subject of optics. Okay, while dealing with eye patients, he got interested in the subject of optics, and that is how he sort of started going through this subject. So this was not what he studied, this was not what he was originally, physics was not his original subject. Okay, so while treating patients, he got interested in the subject of optics, and he almost he left medicine, and he started doing optics. And this is the outcome, that this is one of the most important hurdles, bottlenecks that he cleared, was the establishment of light as an electromagnetic wave. He did not establish the electromagnetic wave nature, but the wave nature. The transverse nature was later established, but the wave nature was of light, which was not being established because of lack of observation, was established by Thomas Young once he switched his field of subject from medicine to optics, to physics. And he has other discoveries in other fields of physics too. Now, after doing physics for several years, I don't know whether he got, whether he started disliking physics or not. I don't know that really. But he left physics. Okay, he left his research in physics, and he started during one of his visits to Egypt. He got interested in deciphering the hieroglyphic scripts. Have you heard of hieroglyphic scripts? The Egyptian scripts that are found from the debris of the pyramids and other relics of Egypt. That the script is called hieroglyphic, and there are special people appointed for deciphering scripts from ancient times that we don't know. And Thomas Young got so interested in deciphering, these hieroglyphic scripts, that he left physics and he joined a team of archaeologists, and he started traveling with them, deciphering hieroglyphic scripts. So this was his third career, and not his last. His last career, ironically, was that of an insurance person. Do all of you know about insurance? People do insurance so that their family gets the benefit of financial benefit if they die suddenly due to an accident, or after their death their family does not face any difficulty. I'm sure all of you have heard about insurance. Thomas Young was not an insurance agent, but he became interested in the economics of insurance policies, how insurance policies have a market, how insurance policies are bought by people. He became interested in the economics of this subject, and I suppose, as I have read somewhere, that he has even published several papers on this subject of the economics of insurance. Okay, so, and the most, what struck me the most is the fact that this person died at the age of 55 only. He died at the age of 55 only, and within that age, 55 is not very old, pretty young, because I mean, pretty young in the sense that he had already been successful in all the four careers that he has chosen. First, a doctor. Being a doctor itself is not a mean task. All of you know that. Needs a lot of hard work to become a doctor. Then a physicist, and a physicist, not just a physics student, but a physicist who has given the world such important fundamental work. Then a hieroglyphic script decipher, a person deciphering a hieroglyphic script, and finally an insurance analyst. Okay, so four completely different divergent career choices in a lifespan of only 55 years. I was very intrigued when I read about Thomas Young, and so I make it a point to share this with my students every year before teaching Thomas Young's experiment, because it's very encouraging. Okay, boosts up your confidence that it's not that uh, even if you are graduating with physics, after a few years, even if you don't like physics, you can always shift your field. It only requires hard work and perseverance to excel in any work that you do. It's only your mindset and the fact that you need to like the work that you are doing. Even if you do it for a small span of time, if you have dedicated yourself, if you do it with sincerity, then you will be able to excel in it. Okay? Okay. Now let's move on to the experiment and the genius of Thomas Young to solve this problem of getting coherent sources so that we can see the what do we call it, the interference pattern. Okay, so this was how Thomas Young got rid of the difficulty. He used a single source. He did not use double source. He used a single source, normal bulb. Then he used, this is exactly what Thomas Young's setup was like. He used a single source, then he used colored filter so that only one color comes out. Okay, we want monochromatic light. So he used colored filter. Here you can see yellow filter is used so that only yellow light comes out. We get something close to a monochromatic light. Then he has a single slit, so through this a narrow beam of light comes out. Okay, so if it's a single slit, then it's all coming out at the same time from this one source, and there is no question of the different rays being non-coherent to each other. Okay, so now how do we produce interference from the light from a single slit? Okay, so here he used his uh, the already existing idea from Huygens principle. What does Huygens principle say? Huygens principle says that every wavefront acts as a source of secondary wavelets. So basically wavefronts are emitted from this slit, and when they come and reach this plane containing the double slit, the wavefront, the point of the wavefront in front of this slit acts as a source of secondary wavelets, and the point of the wavefront in front of the second slit acts as a source of secondary wavelets. So, although we have a single wavefront coming out from this single slit and reaching this double slit, but from the double slit we get two wavefronts. So a single wavefront has been divided into two wavefronts. These two wavefronts propagate towards the screen and they interfere on the screen. While traveling to the screen, they interfere, and on the screen we see the interference pattern. You see, I have shown with a blue double arrowed line over here the region in which the interference pattern will be seen, because this is the region of overlap. An interference pattern can be seen only in the region of overlap. Okay. So, what are the requirements of observing this interference? What are the specialities or the points to note about Young's double slit experiment? First, we have a single source. He used a single source. Two slits. The two slits act as sources that are coherent. So basically, once the two slits have split up the wavefront, so because of the presence of the two slits, we now have two wavefronts. Once you have these two wavefronts, you can forget about the left hand side. Now these two slits are acting as your sources. Clear? And since they are coming from, basically they are coming from a single source, so there is no question of them being non-coherent. They are coherent. So these two slits, as they act as sources that are coherent. Okay. If over here any one slit is covered up, then the pattern on the screen, the interference pattern, will disappear. So this will show that the cause of the pattern is interference and nothing else. If you cover up any one slit, then the pattern will disappear. The pattern appears on the screen only if both the slits are open. Okay, so this is the basic setup. Do you have any difficulty in understanding any point of this setup? If not, then I'll move on. If you have anything you want me to repeat once more here, because this is the most important thing that you need to understand in Young's double slit experiment, the setup. After this, there is just mathematics and some trigonometry that we'll have to do. But this part is very, very important. If you have any doubts, then please unmute and ask me now. Okay? If not, then I'll move on. So, Young's double slit experiment is interference by division of wavefront. A single wavefront is being divided up into two wavefronts, and the two wavefronts interfere with each other to produce the interference pattern on the screen. Okay. So this is another view. This is a three-dimensional view of the setup. So monochromatic light comes here. We have a single slit. So this is the wavefront coming in. This is again to explain to you giving you a 3D view of what is happening. So we have a single wavefront. Can you all see the single wavefront over here? Single wavefront reaches this plane containing two slits S1 and S2, which are d distance apart. These two slits split up the single wavefront into two wavefronts. These two wavefronts reach the screen, which is at a distance capital D from this plane containing the two slits, and on the screen, see alternative dark and bright fringes. Can all of you see this? Okay, so this is exactly what is happening. So wavefronts from S0 reach the slits S1 and S2. Now, according to Huygens principles, every point on these wavefronts act as a source of secondary wavelets. So the points lying at the slits S1 and S2 send out secondary wavelets towards the screen. These wavelets, having originated from a single wave, maintain a constant phase relation, so they are coherent. These secondary wavelets interfere by superposing on each other on the screen and thus produce a pattern known as the interference fringe pattern. So I have, whatever I have said till now, I have written down in the form of points. So you don't need to bother about whether you have missed something. Exactly what happens in a chronological order. Okay. A single wavefront has been split up to produce two wavefronts that interfere. Hence, this is categorized as interference by division of wavefront. Is this clear to everybody? Yes, can I get a response? Whether up to here it is?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay, great. Just remember that S1 and S2, which are actually the slits, but they are posing as the sources over here. As I told you, once the splitting of the wavefronts occur, then we are bothered only about these two wavefronts that are approaching the screen to interfere to produce the pattern. And then we can forget about this thing beyond the double slit structure. Okay, this is just to produce the two wavefronts. Of course, if this is not there, then we won't get this. This has to be there. But for our mathematical analysis, we need to consider only beyond this. And therefore, the slits S1 and S2 are called virtually coherent sources. This is a very, very important point and a possible question, that why uh, the two slits in Young's double slit experiment are called virtually coherent sources. Or you can be asked, what are the two slits in Young's double slit experiment called? Okay, so the answer is, since they are acting as the sources from which coherent waves come out to produce the interference pattern, they are called virtually coherent sources. Why virtual? Because they are not actually the sources, they are acting as sources. And coherent sources because the wavefronts that come out from S1 and S2, they are actually coming from a single wavefront. So they originate from a single wavefront, hence they are coherent. And since S1 and S2 are not the actual sources but slits which are acting as sources, therefore they are called virtually coherent sources. Very, very important point that you should keep in mind. All right. So now we are at a position, now that we have qualitatively understood how Young's applied Huygens principles to the wavefront approaching the coming from the single slit and then broken up into split up into two wavefronts at the position of the double slit, and these double slits act as virtually coherent sources which send forward two coherent waves that interfere on superpose on the screen and therefore produce interference pattern. So next our aim is to study the intensity distribution. Now the observation, as you have seen, I have shown you in the figures, the observation is light and dark stripes, okay, strips of light and dark patches. So obviously the dark patches mean the intensity is low and the bright patches mean the intensity is high. Now we have to mathematically analyze this whole situation so that the result, the mathematical expression that we get for intensity agrees with this observation of regions of low intensity adjacent to regions of high intensity. Okay, so our next aim is a study of the intensity distribution. Okay, now you will see that this figure will come several times. All right, so single source sending out the waves, and we have the two sources, the two slits S1 and S2 at a distance d apart, which have split up the single wavefront, so that now we have a ray S1 starting from S1 traveling towards the screen, and another ray starting from S2 here traveling towards the screen. Now there will be these such rays moving in all directions. Okay, so we take two such rays, S1 to the point P on the screen and from S2 to the same point P on the screen. So the two rays S1P and S2P reach the point P on the screen simultaneously, and we will be applying the principle of superposition at the point P. Okay, so let us suppose that, and just remember that this is the standard notation used, small d for the distance between the two slits and capital D for the distance between the double slit and the screen. This is the standard notation that is used. All right. Now let us suppose that E1, capital E1, is the electric field produced at the point P on the screen due to wave coming from the virtual source S1, and E2 is the electric field produced at the point P on the screen due to wave coming from the virtual source S2. As I told you, S1, S2 is the distance small d, and the distance between the screen and the slit is capital D. We have to keep in mind this very, very important point about this setup, that small d is much, much less than capital D. This is very important, as you'll come to know in a moment. Why this is very important? If small d is of the order of capital D, then in all probabilities, proper interference fringes will not be observed. Okay, and the analysis that we will be doing now, that process of analysis will not be able to be applied. Okay. Okay, so now you have to remember that psi, remember the progressive wave expression is A sine kx minus omega t or A cos kx minus omega t. This we had found out in our very first class. So E1 is the electric part of psi. Psi is the electromagnetic wave. E is the electric part. It is usually customary. It is a customary norm to take the electric field and not the magnetic field. Okay, electromagnetic wave. So we have perpendicular, mutually perpendicular electric and magnetic field, but it has been customary to use the electric field. So following this, we can write E1, the vector, because it has a direction, as I cap E01. So E01 is the amplitude. We take the cosine form, cos, see, kx minus omega t. So kx is the distance traveled by the wave. So S1p, kx, k into S1p minus omega t. All right, and E2, the vector coming out from S2, is I cap E02 cos k S2p minus omega t, kx minus omega t. Okay, so here what I have done is I have just replaced k by 2 pi by lambda in both the expressions. Okay. Now you might ask me the question before moving on, that we can clearly see from the picture that the direction of E1 and E2 are definitely not same. If we treat this to be the x direction and this to be the z direction or y direction, then definitely S1p and S2p, the direction of the vectors E1 and E2, are not along the x direction, but I have conveniently used I cap in both the expressions. So you should have asked me why, although we can see that they are definitely not in the same direction and definitely not along x direction, then why have we used I cap? This is for simplicity, basically. Okay, this is for simplicity of our calculation, and this does not really violate any practical condition. Why? This is where I told you this condition, small d much less than capital D, is very, very important. Okay, so if the two rays are coming out from S1 and S2 are traveling a very large distance, then we can virtually treat them to be traveling in the same direction. I'll give you an example. For example, suppose, okay, first of all, I'll give you the orders of D and small d and capital D. Small d is typically of the order of a millimeter or less. Okay, 1 millimeter or less. So you can understand how small d is. And capital D is of the order of at least a meter or more. Okay. So have you understood how large capital D is compared to small d? So if you suppose you are in a room, so this setup is very important. So when you are setting up Young's double slit experiment in the laboratory, you cannot keep the screen very near the double slit. You have to keep the screen considerably away from the double screen. So they must be at least 2 orders of magnitude different, millimeter and meter. Okay, so if you are in a room and the 2 slits are on one wall 1 millimeter apart and the screen is the opposite wall, so you can imagine, you should be able to visualize that these rays, I cannot draw such a large picture on my screen and show you, but you should be able to visualize if you're sitting in a room. Okay, look at the 2 walls, 2 opposite walls, and just try to visualize the 2 rays coming from 2 points which are just a millimeter apart. If they travel to the opposite wall, they are virtually in the same direction. Okay, is this clear to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Clear? Okay, very good. So that is why, so don't keep any doubts. This is why we are using ICAP for both the vectors, because we don't want to unnecessarily complicate our analysis. I could have used a general vector and then use the component form, etc., but that will unnecessarily complicate our lives, which is already pretty much complicated. So let us not bring in any complications that are avoidable. So this is how Young thought about it, that if I take D to be very small and capital D to be very large, then I can treat the direction of both the rays reaching the screen to be virtually in the same direction. So he used this concept. Okay, now therefore E1 and E2 superpose at the point P on the screen, and the resultant field at the point P is obtained by the principle of superposition that we have already studied. E, therefore the resultant field at P is given by the vector sum of E1 and E2. Okay, so E is given by I cap E01 cos 2 pi by lambda S1P minus omega t plus E02 cos 2 pi by lambda S2P minus omega t. Now, by looking at this resultant field, obviously you cannot say anything about the intensity, right? Now we have to remember that intensity at any point is given by square of the amplitude. Remember when we were doing this Huygens principles, principle of superposition, relation between intensity and amplitude, I told you that each of these will be required, and you'll see why we are doing this. All these that we are going through before actually studying the topic of Young's double slit experiment are sort of like stairs that are taking us to the floor where Young's double slit experiment is there. So we need to climb up the stairs. We cannot just jump to the floor because each step is important. So we have used Huygens principle in producing the virtually coherent sources. We have used the principle of superposition to see that the resultant field at the point P on the screen is this. And now we will use the relation between amplitude and intensity, which shows us that intensity is square of the amplitude, proportional to square of the amplitude. So we can write I equal to some proportionality constant into E square, where E is the magnitude of this vector. Clear? So please, just don't learn by rote whatever is there written in the book or notes that you get from somewhere, or even these that I am giving you. Try to keep your mind very open and analytic so that you understand each step that leads to the next step. Physics is a subject that is extremely logical. Studying physics not only helps you know these natural phenomena, but it also helps you build a very, very logical mind. There is nothing beyond logic in physics. Nothing happens without a reason. Everything has a reason. And studying physics makes the logical reasoning of your mind extremely powerful. So this is, again, I am digressing from the topic a bit, but I can't help it because People who have studied physics well in their undergraduate level, they excel extremely well in any profession that they get into. Trust me, I have several friends from my undergraduate physics batch, from my postgraduate physics batch, who are nowhere into academics. Studying physics does not mean only doing research and teaching in a college. No. I have friends and acquaintances who are doing diverse kinds of jobs, and if you all are interested, then we can spend some time after we finish our syllabus, maybe talking about the different diverse kinds of professions that you can get into. And one of the reasons that people from physics background excel in any profession that they get into is that all these derivations that you do during your course, you should keep your mind open. You should keep thinking, why is this assumption done? I have seen students grudge about it. Physics takes a lot of assumptions, but you have to think, see, I took the same direction, although we can clearly see that they are not in the same direction. Why? Because I gave you this condition, d much less than d. Therefore, practically, taking this same direction is not wrong. It is practical. It is logical. So your logical reasoning becomes very, very clear if you do physics. Anyway, so basically we now have to find out this expression E square, and that will give us the intensity. Okay. So now there is a little bit of mathematics. So you will find a lot of expressions written on the slides, but please don't get sort of, bored with these expressions, because these are important, because finally we have to see what the expression of I is like, so that we can say that by looking at this expression of I, we can say that we have alternate bright and dark lines on the screen in Young's double slit experiment. So I is k e square, and therefore I is equal to k into E01 cos 2 pi by lambda S1p minus omega t plus E02 cos 2 pi by lambda S2p minus omega t whole square. Okay. So it would be very nice if not now, if you're not ready now, then at least after we finish the class and you get these slides, you can work this out on a pen and paper. That will help you. Okay, it's just a lot of terms involved, but it's very, very easy trigonometry, I assure you. So you have to square this. Usually I do it on the blackboard, but it's not possible now, so I have to I have this sort of preloaded on these slides. So k is there, so E01 square cos square this thing, E02 square cos square this thing, and 2ab, a square plus b square plus 2ab. So 2 E01 E02 cos 2 pi by lambda S1p minus omega t cos 2 pi by lambda S2p minus omega t. All right. So we have squared that term. Now obviously again you cannot decide or decipher anything from this expression about the presence of alternate bright and dark stripes on the screen, right? So we have to simplify this. Now this term, let us look at this term that I have circled over here. 2 E01 E02 cos 2 pi by lambda S1p minus omega t cos 2 pi by lambda S2p minus omega t. So this term I have sort of expanded it by using this trigonometrical identity. 2 cos A cos B is cos A plus B plus cos A minus B. All of you know trigonometry better than me, so you know this identity. So I have just used it, and I have written this term as E01 E02. I have taken it outside the bracket, and so I have 2 cos A cos B inside, and that I have written as cos A plus B. A is this 2 pi by lambda S1p minus omega t, and B is this 2 pi by lambda S2p minus omega t. So I have written this as cos A plus B plus cos A minus B. Okay. So this becomes E01 E02 cos 2 pi by lambda. From here omega t, okay, so you have 2 pi by lambda S1p plus S2p minus twice omega t, and from this term you have the omega t's go away, so you have 2 pi by lambda S1p minus S2. Alright. So now I use this expression instead of this expression in the expression of I. You can say that I have made my life more complicated. What I still cannot understand anything from this expression of I. Okay. So now we have to think about a practical situation a bit. So this is the expression of I. But as it is, you cannot still decipher anything from this expression. So we have to think about the practical situation a bit. Now, as we had seen earlier that for any optical beam, the frequency is of the order of 10 to the power 15 per second. Right, the cycles change in this at this speed. The angular velocity, the angular frequency rather, is 10 to the power 15 per second. So in 1 second we have almost 10 to the power 15 cycles. So all the terms that contain omega t, because this is the case for optical beam, we had already seen this. So all the terms with omega t will vary 10 to the power 15 times per second. Now, as it is, you know by now that any detector or observer cannot register all these 10 to the power 15 moments. So what does the detector or observer have? We have to take an average. Whenever we have some quantity vary several times within a very short span of time, then what do we use instead of that quantity? We use its average. So we have to, so when the intensity like this is falling on the detector or the observer, so if it is happening on the screen, then the observer is our eyes. So our eyes will average it out. We cannot see these 10 to the power 15 pulses separately. We see an average vision. Okay. So we have to replace the terms containing omega t by their time averages. See, this is the logic you have to apply. You have to know where to apply the logic. Terms containing omega t, they change so fast that the detector can only register an average value, not all the individual values. So we have to replace all the terms. So you can see that there are 1, 2, 3 terms containing omega t, and there is only one term containing that is devoid of omega t. Okay. We have to now do some time average calculation. What kind of terms do we have? We have a cos squared term containing omega t and a just cosine term containing omega t. So let us see what is the time average of any cos squared term. This is the expression of time average. 1 by 2 pi integration 0 to 2 pi cos square theta d theta, which gives you half. So here the value of theta is 2 pi by lambda s1p minus omega t or 2 pi by lambda s2p minus omega t. The cos square term contains either this as its argument or this as its argument. So we have the average of both these terms, cos square 2 pi by lambda s1p minus omega t and cos square 2 pi by lambda s2p minus omega t will come out to be half. Okay. And what is the average of cos theta? 1 by 2 pi 0 to integration 0 to 2 pi cos theta d theta comes out to be 0. I hope you know how to do these integrations. I don't have to show you how to do these integrations. Okay. So which term contains theta as just a cosine term? This. Theta is 2 pi by lambda s1p plus s2p minus omega t. So if you take the time average of this cosine term, then it should come out to be 0. Alright. So in this expression, I write down the expression of I again, and in this expression, the two cos square terms, when replaced by their time average, gives you only half, and the one cosine term that contains omega t when replaced by its time average is containing only 0. Okay, so now I have a much more simplified version of I. What do I have? I have half k E01 square plus half k E02 square plus k E01 E02 cos 2 pi by lambda S2p minus S1p. This, okay, this term goes to 0. All right, is this step clear to everybody, or do you want me to repeat this? Please just tell me once more. Have you understood why
Ma'am,
we have
understood.
understood? Everyone, some others also unmute and tell me. Okay, no one is unmuting,
Yes,
so I'll
ma'am.
okay, okay. So I'll carry on. Okay, okay, great. So now I write the final expression of intensity at any point P on the screen. Remember, P can be anywhere on the screen. So the direction in which those rays S1P and S2P travel can be in any direction, just depends on the position of P on the screen. So I write the expression of intensity at any point P on the screen as I equal to I1 plus I2 plus 2 root over I1 I2 cos phi. And let us identify the terms. I1 is half k E01 square. This term here I have written as I1, which is the intensity due to the slit S1 alone. I2 is half k E02 square, intensity due to S2 alone, and phi is this expression 2 pi by lambda S2p minus S1p, which I call the phase difference between the superposing waves. Okay. S2p minus S1p is actually the path difference. When the waves, let us go back to, just a second, let us go back to our this setup. Yes, here. So see, if you look at this, then S1p is the path traveled by the ray from S1 in moving to P. S2p is the path traveled by the ray from S2 to in moving to P, and they are definitely not traveling the same distances. Very small difference between the distances, because we know that capital D is much less than small d, but we will see that this small difference cannot be neglected. That logic why it cannot be neglected, that also I will give you. So the difference between S2p and S1p is the difference in path, the path difference incurred as the rays travel from their respective sources to the point P on the screen. Now you can see that the point P can lie anywhere on the screen, and depending on its position, the value of this path difference S2P minus S1P will change. And the relation between path difference and phase difference is 2 pi by lambda. Phase difference is 2 pi by lambda multiplied by path difference. Okay, so phi equal to 2 pi by lambda S2p minus S1p is called the phase difference between the superposing waves. Okay, so now we see whether this intensity expression can give us the conditions of maxima and minima, whether from this intensity expression we can understand the presence of the bright and the dark lines on the screen. So this is the expression of intensity. Clearly it has a cosine term, and it will be governed by the cosine term, because I1 is a constant, half k E01 square, just the intensity due to the ray coming from slit 1. I2 is a constant, half k E02 square, K is 2 square, intensity due to light coming from the second slit. Constants, because we are not changing the source, we are not changing the double slit, they are constant. So the only varying term in this expression is cos phi. So the expression of intensity is governed by this cosine term, and phase difference equal to 2 pi by lambda S2p minus S1p. As the point P moves on the screen, as I just showed you, the path difference S2p minus S1p, and hence the phase difference phi, keeps changing. So this is the only varying term in the expression of intensity. So that will govern what kind of intensity, what value of I we will get on the screen. Okay, very, very important. Understanding this point is very, very important, that it is only the cos phi term that will govern the intensity expression. And why phi is a variable term? Because P can be anywhere on the screen. Depending on the position of P, the value of S2P minus S1P will change. That is, the value of path difference will change. And depending on the value of the path difference, we will get different values of the phase difference. Okay, and that will give us different values for the expression of I. Now we know that the maximum or minimum of a cosine term is plus or minus 1. So maximum value of intensity is when cos phi is plus 1. So that is I1 plus I2 plus 2 root over I1 I2. Okay, and that can be written as root I1 plus root I2 whole square. When does this happen? When cos phi is plus 1 or phi is equal to 2n pi. N can be any integer, 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. Now phi equal to 2n pi means, write down the expression of phi, 2 pi by lambda S2p minus S1p equal to 2n pi. So minus S1p equal to n lambda. This is the condition of constructive interference, when the path difference is an integral multiple of the wavelength lambda, the wavelength of the light coming from the monochromatic source. We get the maximum values of the intensity, and the resultant condition is called constructive interference. Whereas when cos phi is minus 1, we get the minimum value of I as I1 plus I2 minus 2 root over I1 I2, which can be written as root I1 minus root I2 whole square. So this happens when cos phi is minus 1, that is phi is equal to odd multiple of pi. Okay, so 2n plus 1 pi, n equal to 0, 1, 2, etc. So that, write down the value of phi again, 2 pi by lambda S2p minus S1p equal to 2n plus 1 pi. So S2p minus S1p equal to n plus half lambda. So whenever the path difference is half integral multiple of the wavelength of the incoming light, we have destructive interference. This condition results in the minimum value of I, and we call this the condition of destructive interference. Okay, note that if I1 and I2 are same, which is the case mostly, because we have two slits, it is our constructive precision to make the two slits of almost the same width. You know, they should be thin, both should be thin up to the same order, so that the intensity coming out from S1 and S2 should be almost same, so that we can write I1 equal to I2. So this was a general discussion till now, where we took I1 and I2 as two different values. In general, we should have I1 equal to I2 equal to I, and then maximum intensity becomes twice I and minimum intensity becomes 0. Okay, so when I1 equal to I2 equal to I0, say, we can write I is equal to I0 plus I0, I1 plus I2 equal plus twice root over I0 into I0 cos phi. So we have I equal to 2I0 into 1 plus cos phi. So I equal to 4I0. We can write 1 plus cos phi as 2 cos square phi by 2. So I equal to 4I0 cos square phi by 2. So the ratio of the intensity on the screen to the incoming intensity, I0 is the incident intensity. The ratio is a cos square function, okay, varying with the phase difference phi, okay. So is the fringe pattern that we get. Cos square phi by 2, maximum value I max is twice I0, minimum value is 0. These are the positions where we get the minimum value, odd multiple of pi, and these are the positions where we get maximum intensity, integral multiples of pi. So for integral multiples of lambda, we get maximum intensity. For half integral multiples of lambda, we get minimum intensity. And the pattern follows a cos square phi function. Exactly what we see on the screen. So now you see from the expression of the intensity, we have been able to decode the pattern that we see on the screen. We have a mathematical expression that stands for this pattern that we see on the screen. So what are the conditions for observing this pattern of sustained interference? First, the sources must be coherent. Second, capital D must be much greater than small d. Third, the sources must be equidistant from either slit. That is, S, the original source, must be equally distanced from S1 and S2. That is, S1S must be almost equal to S2S. Why? Because we don't want any path difference to enter the rays before they come out from S1 and S2. Any path difference should be there between them only after they come out from S1 and S2 and travel towards the screen. Number 4, the source must be monochromatic. As you can see from the formula that we are using, the formula for monochromatic light. And for getting high contrast between the bright and dark fringes, I1 and I2 must be equal. It is only then that you get the maximum value as twice I0 and the minimum value as 0. Otherwise, you will get the maximum value as root over I1 plus root over I2 whole square and the minimum value is root over I1 minus root over I2 whole square. If there is a lot of difference between I1 and I2, then the minimum value will not be very less than the maximum value. So you will get regions of high intensity and you will get regions of a little low intensity. But you can see a bright patch only if it is adjacent to a dark patch, right? সাদাটা বা আলোটা তখনই পরিষ্কারভাবে দেখা যাবে যখন তার পাশের কালোটা খুব স্পষ্ট হবে। দুটো সাদার মধ্যে যদি দুটো আলোর মধ্যে যদি কালো না থাকে তাহলে তুমি দুটো আলোকে আলাদা করে দেখতে পাবে না। Understood? So the two bright patches must have a darkest patch in between them so that you can understand that there are two bright patches and not one. So for getting fringes with high contrast, that is bright fringes very bright and dark fringes as dark as possible, I1 must be almost equal to I2. And the last condition is that the sources must be in the same state of polarization. But we are not, at present, we don't know enough things to explain why this last point comes. But you just need to know that this is another point for obtaining sustained interference. So these 6 points, the 6 conditions for obtaining sustained interference is again very important as a question. And all this that we have done today, finding out the expression of I, then finding out the condition for getting bright fringes, that is constructive interference, finding out the condition for getting dark fringes, that is destructive interference, all these are extremely important, okay? So I'll end today. There are a lot more things to talk about Young's double slit experiment. This is not the end. So we'll continue